My daughter called him daddy for the first time. And that same night, I found out he was sleeping with my sister. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stayed calm and planned the kind of revenge no one saw coming. What I did next, they're still talking about it. The first time my daughter called Mark daddy, it stopped me in my tracks. I was pouring juice in the kitchen, half distracted, when I heard that tiny voice from the living room say it so clearly, Daddy. I froze. My hands trembled just enough to spill a few drops of apple juice onto the counter. I wiped them away with the dish towel, blinked, and then walked around the corner. There they were, curled up on the couch together. Mark had our 2-year-old in his arms, her head resting on his chest, one of her chubby hands wrapped tightly around his finger. He looked up at me, his smile warm, proud, like he had waited his whole life for this. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "She called me daddy." I nodded. "Yeah, I did." And I smiled. I really did. Because for just that moment, I believed it all. I believed we had made it. That after everything after the divorce, the postpartum loneliness, the struggle of raising a baby on my own, this was my reward. A good man, a stable home, a daughter who felt safe enough to give him that name. It hadn't been easy letting someone new into our lives. I'd met Mark through mutual friends. He was a high school teacher, funny, kind, patient. He never pushed. When we started dating, he didn't flinch at the idea of me having a kid. If anything, he leaned into it. He came to birthday parties, helped with diapers, learned the bedtime routine like it was second nature. For a while, I told myself it was okay to trust again. That night, we ate spaghetti on the patio with the fairy lights overhead. The baby fell asleep in her high chair, her curls damp from the Georgia heat. Mark helped me clean up, kissed me slow by the sink, and whispered, "I love you." I believed him. Later, I was folding laundry in the bedroom while he showered. That's when I noticed his smartwatch buzz on the dresser. He never took it off unless he was showering or sleeping. I glanced at the screen just out of habit, not snooping, and that's when I saw the message flash. "You still taste like last weekend." My throat closed up. I stared at the watch like it had spoken out loud. Maybe I had read it wrong. Maybe it was some stupid prank text from a friend. I stepped closer. The message faded from view, but I tapped the screen and saw the preview again. "Can't stop thinking about you. Saturday?" I didn't move. I just stood there, socks in my hand, heart thudding so loud it drowned out the sound of the shower. Mark had always kept his phone close, too close. He'd take it into the bathroom, the garage, even on walks with the dog. I joked about it before. "What are you hiding, your secret TikTok career?" He'd laugh it off, playfully accuse me of being paranoid. "Trust issues from your ex," he'd say. I get it, but my gut knew better. I didn't say a word when he came out of the shower. I kissed him goodnight. I smiled. I let him curl around me like nothing had changed, because I needed to know more. The next morning, I told him I was taking the baby to my sister Vanessa's for a play date. She and I had grown up close, and she lived just across town. I hadn't seen her in about a week. She'd been busy, she said, but we usually got together every few days. Something about that had been bothering me lately too, but I couldn't put my finger on it. When I got to Vanessa's house, I sat on the porch while my daughter played with her dog in the yard. Vanessa brought us lemonade. She looked tired. Her hair wasn't done. She didn't have makeup on, a rare thing for her. I asked her if everything was okay. She said she'd been dealing with stuff, waved it off. That's when I noticed her phone screen light up. Mark work, my breath caught. Vanessa tilted her phone away, too fast. "Wait," I said, my voice barely audible. "Why is Mark texting you?" She blinked, then laughed. "Oh, it's not what you think." I hadn't even told her what I thought. "It's just about the birthday party," she said quickly. "He's helping you plan it, right?" I nodded slowly. Right, but inside, I felt like I had swallowed glass. I stayed for another hour. I watched her play with my daughter. I watched how she didn't look me in the eye. I watched how my daughter, sweet, innocent, reached for her, called her Aunt Nessa, and melted into her arms. The betrayal was hiding in plain sight. That evening, When I got home, Mark was back in the garage. He said he was fixing the weed whacker, but I heard music playing from his Bluetooth speaker and the soft, feminine voice of someone on speakerphone before he clicked it off too fast. I kissed him goodnight again. I held my daughter tight that night, her little body curled up beside me, while Mark slept soundly on the other side of the bed. I watched her breathe. I thought about the life I was trying to build for her. And I promised myself something. I wouldn't let her grow up thinking this was normal. That love was a lie wrapped in comfort. That women just have to swallow betrayal to keep a family together. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I had started to plan. And soon, everyone would know. The next morning, the sunlight poured into the kitchen as I poured my first cup of coffee. My daughter was already in her high chair, eating her scrambled eggs with chubby fingers, humming to herself between bites. Mark came in wearing that worn gray t-shirt he always slept in, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said, "Smells good in here." I smiled and stirred the eggs on the stove. It was the same smile I'd given him since I saw that message on his watch, the same one I gave when he said he loved me, or when he talked about buying a swing set for the backyard. But behind that smile, a storm was forming. And now that I knew how much he had lied, I couldn't stop watching him every word, every move, every touch. Everything started to look different. He left for work around 8:30. He was a high school English teacher, and he usually left before me. I stood in the doorway with the baby on my hip, watching him walk down the driveway. He waved as he backed out, and I waved back. I waited until I couldn't see his car anymore. Then I grabbed my phone. I'd never been the type to snoop. I hated it. But something about being lied to being betrayed like this, it flips a switch in you. I opened my laptop and signed into the cloud account I knew he used to back up his phone. He had once asked me to help him recover old photos for a school project, and I remembered the email and password. He hadn't changed a thing. The screen loaded slowly. I sat there in the silence, the baby now napping in the other room, my stomach twisted in knots as the messages appeared. And there it was, dozens of messages between him and Vanessa. Some were flirty, some were disgusting, some were just cruel. "She doesn't suspect a thing. You're so much better in bed. Let's sneak away again next weekend." I scrolled until I couldn't anymore. The messages stretched back months, maybe even a year. I saw photos, time-stamped and geotagged, of them in hotels I'd never heard of. Her hand in his, her face close to his, both of them smiling, while I was probably home giving our daughter a bath. I felt sick, not just at the cheating, but at the level of deception. They had plotted to keep this quiet. They had talked about me like I was some clueless houseplant in the background. My sister, my own flesh and blood. I closed the laptop. There wasn't a doubt in my mind anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I stood up, walked over to the fridge, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and sat back down at the kitchen table. If they were going to act like I was stupid, I'd let them think that at least for now. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, Kathy. She wasn't just a family attorney, she was an old friend from high school, someone I'd trusted for years. "Kathy," I said, my voice calm but hollow, "I need you to help me get a divorce." Her silence on the other end was short. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about the watch message, the backup account, the texts, the photos. I told her about Vanessa. When I finished, she took a breath and said, "First of all, I'm sorry. Second, you have a strong case. I don't want this to be messy," I said. "I don't want a courtroom drama. I just want to protect my daughter and my home." She understood. Then we planned carefully. You let him think everything is fine while I prepare the paperwork. When the time is right, we hit him with everything at once. I hung up, feeling strangely steady. Later that day, I called my mom. Not to tell her about the affair. I wasn't ready yet, but just to hear her voice. My mom had always been the strong, quiet type. Raised 3 kids on a waitress's salary after our dad walked out. I never appreciated how hard that must have been until I became a mom myself. She asked how Mark was doing. "He's fine," I said. She asked about Vanessa. "She's around." I hated lying to her, but I needed time. I needed to be sure everything was in place before I tore the roof off my life. After I got off the phone, I picked up my daughter and held her close. "Mommy's got you," I whispered. "I promise." That evening, Mark came home with flowers. Just a little grocery store, bouquet of daisies and sunflowers, wrapped in brown paper. He smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. "Thought these might brighten your day," he said, kissing me on the forehead. I took them, smiled, thanked him, put them in a vase. Vanessa texted me about an hour later. "Hey, want me to come over and help plan the baby's party this weekend?" I stared at her name on the screen. I typed back, "Of course. Let's do dinner Saturday night. Just you, me, and Mark." I hit send, then looked across the living room at my husband, who was tickling our daughter on the floor. She squealed with laughter, her little hands reaching for him, her curls bouncing. And all I could think was, he's going to be sorry he ever thought I wouldn't find out. And when I expose them both, he's going to lose everything. Let him smile now, because I'm just getting started. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I kept my face warm, my voice sweet, and my attitude calm the entire week, playing the part of the doting partner while every moment behind the scenes was spent building my case. I saved every screenshot to a flash drive and printed copies, just in case. My lawyer had everything she needed to proceed, but I wasn't ready to file yet. Not until I got my moment. Mark didn't suspect a thing. He kissed me every morning before leaving for school, sent me goofy selfies during his lunch breaks, and even came home early on Friday to mow the lawn and clean the porch. To him, we were just a happy little family, gearing up for a quiet weekend together. Vanessa, ever the actress, showed up Saturday night with a bottle of wine and a too-wide smile. "I brought red, your favorite," she said, like she hadn't spent the last year stabbing me in the back. She wore her hair up in a messy bun, the kind she always said made her look like accidental hot mom, and gave Mark a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. He laughed when she teased him about his dad bod, and I fought the urge to throw the bottle of wine through the nearest window. I had made lasagna, one of Mark's favorites. I timed everything down to the minute, knowing exactly how this night needed to go. We put our daughter to bed early. She was too young to understand what was happening, and I wanted her nowhere near what was about to unfold. "Just the 3 of us," I said brightly as we sat down at the table. "Like old times." Vanessa raised her glass. "To family." I raised mine. "To truth," Mark chuckled, not noticing the edge in my voice. The small talk started memories from high school, how fast the baby was growing, jokes about Mark's students. It was like a bad sitcom with a laugh track no one could hear. My heart was thudding so loud in my ears, I barely tasted the food. And then it was time. I stood up. "I have dessert," I said. "But first, I have something to show you both." Vanessa looked curious. Mark's eyes lit up. "What is it?" I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. My laptop was already connected. I pulled up a folder on the desktop labeled Simply Moments. On the screen appeared a slideshow at first, pictures of our daughter, her first steps, her birthday cake, her giggling in the bath. Vanessa smiled, touched her heart. Mark leaned back in his chair, proud and relaxed. Then the photos changed. The next image was a screenshot of a text. "Can't wait to feel you again." Another followed. "She's clueless." "It's kinda hot." The photos kept coming, text threads, selfies, even a blurry picture of the 2 of them kissing in a parking lot. I recognized near Vanessa's apartment. The slideshow ran automatically. Neither of them moved. The room was dead silent. I didn't speak until the final image loaded. It was from just 2 weeks ago. Mark and Vanessa in a booth at a sports bar, her hand on his thigh, his hand under the table. I turned to face them. "Vanessa, I hope the wine pairs nicely with Betrayal. And Mark, how's the lasagna? Not poisoned, don't worry." But I did think about it. Mark's mouth was open. No words came out. Vanessa looked like she'd been hit by a truck. "You went through my messages?" she finally whispered. "You crawled into my bed and slept with the father figure of my daughter," I snapped. "You don't get to act offended." Mark finally found his voice. "Olivia, listen. No, I cut him off. You listen. I know everything. How long it's been going on. Where you went. What you did. I even know about the weekend you told me you had a teacher's retreat in Atlanta. Funny how your GPS showed you parked outside Vanessa's for 3 days straight. He stood up from the table, his hands raised. I can explain. There is no explanation, I said calmly. You're not just a liar. You're a coward. And Vanessa? You're worse. You knew what I went through after my divorce. You knew how scared I was to trust again. You knew this man was the first person my daughter ever called daddy. Tears were falling down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt you. Then why did you do it? I asked. Why did you come to my house and hug my baby with the same hands that touched my husband? Mark tried again. It was a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated. Planned. And now? I smiled. Now you'll both live with it. He tried to speak again, but I walked past him and pulled a manila envelope from the drawer. I slapped it down on the table. Inside is a copy of the evidence. My lawyer already has the rest. On Monday, I'm filing for divorce. And since the house is in my name, and I have proof of infidelity, you'll be packing your things by the end of the week. He looked like he'd been shot. You're kicking me out? You kicked yourself out the moment you touched her. I turned to Vanessa. You are no longer welcome in my life. Don't call me. Don't text me. And you'll never see my daughter again. She sobbed into her napkin. Mark sat back down, stunned, like the gravity of the situation had finally landed. Enjoy dessert, I said coldly. It's the last meal you'll ever have in this house. And with that, I walked to the baby's room, closed the door behind me, and let the sounds of their world crumbling fade into silence. She was asleep in her crib, peaceful and unaware. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back from her forehead, and whispered, It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's got you. Always. The next morning, I woke up with a strange kind of stillness in my chest. Not emptiness, no, I wasn't hollow, but a sort of calm, like the air after a thunderstorm. You know it's not over, but for a moment, everything's quiet, clear. Mark had spent the night on the couch. I hadn't asked him to. I hadn't said a word after confronting them. He just didn't have the guts to come back into the bedroom after what happened at dinner. And I didn't care. I didn't care if he slept standing up or walked barefoot to another state, as long as he stayed away from me. Vanessa had left in a rush, red-faced, clutching her purse like it was the only thing she had left in the world. I hadn't heard a word from her since. Not a call, not a text, not a please forgive me or a I made a mistake. Nothing. Which was fine. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses from someone who looked me in the eyes for months while sleeping with the man I loved. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the baby monitor beside me. My daughter was still sleeping. She didn't know that anything had changed. And for her sake, I wanted to keep it that way for now. Mark stumbled in around 7:30, still wearing his wrinkled t-shirt from the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hair stuck up in every direction. He looked like guilt had chewed him up and spit him out. He didn't say good morning, didn't smile, just stood there awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. Can we talk? He finally asked. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Talk. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his elbows on the table, hands folded like he was about to beg for mercy. I know I screwed up, he said. I don't even have the right words, Liv. Start with, I'm sorry, I replied, my tone flat. I am, he said quickly. I'm sorry. I really am. What I did was wrong, disgusting, selfish. I get that. I lost my head. You lost your pants too, he flinched. Okay, I deserve that. No, I said. What you deserve hasn't even started yet. He sighed and leaned forward. Look, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to explain. Explain what, exactly? I interrupted. How you could betray the two people who trusted you the most. How you could look me in the eye and lie to my face every single day. Or how you used my daughter's trust like a shield to cover your tracks. His mouth opened, closed again. You didn't just cheat on me, I continued. You poisoned every memory we built. Every I love you, every bedtime story, every moment I thought we were safe. You stained all of it. I didn't mean for it to go that far, he said. I laughed bitterly. You don't accidentally cheat for a year, Mark. You make choices over and over again. And you chose her. He dropped his head into his hands. I didn't choose her. I got caught up. I don't even know why it started. Because you're weak, I said, standing up. Because you never had the backbone to be the man you pretended to be. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a note I'd saved. I already spoke to my lawyer. You'll be served divorce papers on Monday. You're leaving the house by the end of the week. He looked up sharply. Liv, come on. Can we at least talk about custody? About seeing the baby? I paused. You're not her biological father. You know that. I know, but she calls me daddy. And whose fault is that? I snapped. You wanted that role. You earned it. Then you destroyed it. You don't get to lean on her love now. His voice cracked. She's the only thing that made me feel like I mattered. My chest tightened. For a second, just a second, I felt something almost like pity. But then I remembered the messages, the lies, the betrayal, and the flicker of pity died out like a candle in the wind. You matter to her because I let you, I said. I let you in. I trusted you. That trust is gone. He stood slowly, shoulders slumped. So, that's it? That's it. He left the room without another word. I stood there, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, my knuckles white. I had taken back control. I had exposed him. I had started the process to free myself. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. Not just of a relationship, but of a future I had imagined, of birthday parties with him at my side, of bedtime stories read together, of a family that wasn't real. Later that afternoon, I took my daughter to the park. It was warm for October, the leaves just beginning to turn, swirling down in golds and reds. She toddled through the grass, her little hands reaching for falling leaves, her giggles slicing through the quiet like sunlight through fog. I watched her, and I thought about the woman I was a year ago, so full of hope, so certain that I had finally found something real. But standing there, with the wind in my hair and my daughter's laugh ringing in my ears, I realized something important. I was still standing, even after everything, even after my heart had been broken in two by someone I had trusted with my whole world. I was still here, and I wasn't going anywhere. Sunday morning came with rain, tapping on the windows like an old friend I didn't want to see. It was gray, humid, and heavy, the kind of weather that makes everything feel slower, like the world is dragging its feet. Mark was still in the house, which annoyed me more than I expected. The man who once made me laugh until I cried now just made me tired. He spent most of the morning holed up in the guest room packing, probably, or pretending to. I didn't care. I had bigger things to worry about now, like how to tell my daughter. She was too young to understand words like betrayal, divorce, or heartbreak. But she wasn't stupid. She would notice the empty chair at dinner, the missing voice reading her stories at night. And one day, she'd ask why, and I didn't have that answer yet. I stared out the window, sipping coffee, listening to her babble to her stuffed bear on the living room rug. Her innocence was like a wall between her and everything that had just happened. I wanted to keep that wall up as long as I could, but I also knew life had a way of knocking down walls when you least expected it. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it only to see Vanessa. She stood there under a black umbrella, mascara smudged, looking like a drowned cat who knew she wasn't welcome. "Please," she said, "can I talk to you?" I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. "I know I'm the last person you want to see right now," she continued, her voice trembling, "but I had to come." "You should have stayed gone," I said, keeping my voice low. "You lost the right to show up on this porch the minute you slept with him." "I didn't come to defend myself," she said quickly. "I came to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. She continued, "I was stupid. I was lonely. I thought, God, I don't even know what I thought. That maybe he loved me. That maybe we had something real. But I see now that he was just using me. I was the side dish to your main course. I crossed my arms. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. And I know that doesn't make it any better. But I needed to say it to your face. I wanted to scream, to curse, to ask her how many nights she had laid in my bed with my future unraveling around her. But something about her face told me she already hated herself more than I ever could. Still, I wasn't going to offer forgiveness. Not now, maybe not ever. I'm not going to thank you, I said flatly. I don't care if you feel better. You're not the one who has to rebuild a family. She nodded. I understand. Then, to my surprise, she held out a small manila envelope. What's this? It's from him, she said. I found it at my place yesterday. I think he meant to hide it from you. I hesitated, then took it. He said he was going to start over, she muttered. With me. Can you believe that? Even after you exposed him, he thought I'd still want him. Do you? She laughed bitterly. Not if he were the last man on earth. Good, I thought. Tell your daughter. I'm sorry too, she added. Not that it means anything. She turned and walked away, umbrella bobbing as she disappeared down the sidewalk. I closed the door and opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, credit card bills, a receipt for a cheap ring from a pawn shop, and worst of all, an application for a new apartment. 1 bedroom. No space for a child. It hit me like a punch to the gut. He hadn't planned to fight for custody. He hadn't planned to stay. He was going to leave us both. He had chosen Vanessa. And now that his fantasy had fallen apart, he was scrambling. I sat down hard on the couch, the papers in my lap, heart pounding. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about responsibility, about my daughter, about the life I still had to live. I waited until she was down for her nap. Then I knocked on the guest room door. He opened it slowly. His eyes looked tired, his mouth drawn in a tight line. We need to talk, I said. He nodded and stepped aside. I walked in and tossed the envelope on the bed. She gave me this. His face went pale. Planning a new life without us? I asked. You were going to leave her too? I didn't know what I was doing, he mumbled. I thought you'd kick me out. I didn't think I'd get a say. You could have tried, I snapped. You could have acted like a father. But instead, you made plans behind our backs. He sat down, head in his hands. I didn't deserve to be her dad, he said. No, I agreed. But you were. And now you'll live with what that means. What do you want from me, Olivia? I want you out by Friday. And I want zero drama, he nodded. Also, I added, don't ever tell her this was my fault. Don't ever lie to her about why you left. I won't, he said softly. I swear. I turned to leave, then paused. You broke something that can't be fixed, I said. But you can still choose not to break it more. That's all I'm asking. He didn't respond. I closed the door behind me. Later that night, I stood in the hallway, watching my daughter sleep. Her tiny fingers curled around her stuffed bear. Her breathing soft and steady. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled in the distance. I whispered, You won't grow up thinking this is normal. I'll show you better. I promise. And I meant it. The house felt quieter than usual the next day, as if it knew we were all just pretending to exist inside it. The tension in the walls hummed like electricity, even when no one was speaking. Mark had begun moving some of his things into boxes quietly, without protest. He didn't ask for help, and I didn't offer. It was strange, watching someone you once loved become a stranger before your eyes. He used to make coffee just the way I liked it, know which drawer I kept the spare toothbrushes in, and hum along to that same worn-out 70s playlist we listened to every Sunday morning. Now he barely spoke unless he had to, and when he did, it was with the detached tone of someone walking out of a hotel room rather than a home. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad in front of me. I had begun making a new kind of to-do list, not groceries or errands. This one was titled, Moving Forward. It felt like the only control I had left. At the top, 1, speak to a therapist. 2, set up new checking account. 3, detair. 4, start legal paperwork for full custody. Mark was still here, but my mind had already adjusted to life without him. I wasn't waiting for him to apologize anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to change. I was building my escape brick by brick, quietly and deliberately. That morning, my best friend Caroline showed up with 2 travel mugs of coffee and a look on her face that said she wasn't leaving until I talked. "I brought the good stuff," she said, setting the mugs on the counter. "Tell me everything." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to tell her. I just wasn't sure how to say it all without falling apart. She waited patiently, like always. So I started talking. I told her about the messages, the other women, the dinner, Vanessa, the lies, everything. And Caroline? She didn't gasp. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "I never liked him anyway," even though I knew she probably thought it. She just listened. Her silence was permission for me to be messy, to be human, to be broken without shame. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You did everything right," she said softly, "and you still got hurt. That's not your fault." I nodded, eyes stinging. "You don't need to be perfect to deserve love, Liv," she continued. "You just need someone who doesn't make you question it." "I thought I had that," I whispered. "I know," she said. "That's the worst part." We sat in silence for a while. She held my hand. I clung to her words. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was holding the world up on my own. After she left, I spent the afternoon cleaning the nursery. Not because it was messy, but because I needed something to do that reminded me of the good parts of my life. The soft yellow curtains, the tiny shoes lined up on the shelf, the lullaby mobile still turning slowly over the crib it grounded me. Reminded me that, no matter what had fallen apart, there was still something beautiful growing here, something worth protecting. Mark peeked in around 4. Oh, that afternoon. He was holding a plain cardboard box and shifting uncomfortably. "I'll be gone by Thursday," he said. "Got a place to stay at Tom's." Tom, his coworker. One of the guys who probably knew what he was doing and never said a word. I didn't respond. I just nodded and kept folding baby clothes into drawers. "Listen," he said, his voice quieter now. "I know I'm the villain in all this. I've made peace with that. But I really did love being here. With her. With you." I stopped folding. "If you loved us," I said, turning to look at him, "you wouldn't have thrown us away." He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. "I'll leave the garage key on the counter," he mumbled, retreating. Later that evening, I took my daughter out for a walk. We went around the neighborhood, the sun low and soft behind the trees, the air smelling like early autumn. She pointed at dogs, waved at joggers, laughed when the wind blew her hair into her eyes. I kept thinking about the future, about what kind of life I wanted to build for her now. One with stability, kindness, peace, a home where she never had to hear raised voices or walk on eggshells. A place where love didn't come with secrets or shame. When we got back home, I bathed her, sang her a lullaby, and rocked her until she fell asleep on my shoulder. I held her longer than usual, just soaking in the weight of her against me. This tiny person had no idea her world was changing, but I did, and I was going to make damn sure it changed for the better. After I laid her down, I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me, listening to the crickets hum their nighttime chorus. Mark's boxes were lined up by the front door. I didn't feel sad about it anymore. I felt clear. The next few days would be hard. The months after that, probably harder. There would be questions to answer, routines to adjust, moments of doubt, and exhaustion and heartbreak. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready. Thursday morning arrived with a quiet sense of finality. The sky was pale and overcast, as if even the sun didn't feel like showing up to witness the end of this chapter. I was already dressed and in the kitchen when I heard Mark shuffling around the living room, his steps slower than usual. He didn't have much left to pack. Most of what he owned fit in a few suitcases and boxes, and frankly, he hadn't made much of an effort to collect anything beyond that. I didn't speak first. I let the silence stretch between us like a rope pulled taut. If he wanted words, he would have to offer them. "I'm leaving after lunch," he finally said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was welcome to cross into the kitchen. I stirred my tea. Good. He hesitated, eyes scanning the room as if trying to memorize it. I meant to say goodbye to her. To the baby. She's not yours to say goodbye to, I replied calmly. You gave that up the moment you decided your own ego was more important than her future. His shoulders dropped. She doesn't even know what happened. No, I said, meeting his gaze. But one day she will, and I will never lie to her about who walked away. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe defend himself, maybe apologize again, but instead, he nodded slowly and turned back to the living room. Around noon, I heard the soft thud of the front door closing, followed by the muffled sound of a car pulling out of the driveway. I waited a full 10 minutes before walking out and checking. He was gone. And just like that, it was over. It didn't feel victorious. It didn't feel like closure. It just felt quiet. But it was the right kind of quiet. The kind you get when a storm finally passes. I went upstairs to check on my daughter. She was in her crib, babbling to herself, one sock half off, and her tiny fingers tugging at the stuffed elephant beside her. I leaned over the crib, brushing a hand across her soft hair, and felt my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. It was just us now. That evening, I called my lawyer to move forward with finalizing the divorce papers. There was no resistance from Mark's side. He'd already signed what needed signing. Maybe he knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. Maybe he just didn't care enough to fight. Either way, the process would be quick. I also took the opportunity to update the emergency contacts on my daughter's daycare paperwork. I removed his name, added Caroline's. She had already agreed to be the backup if I ever needed someone, and I trusted her completely. That decision felt like reclaiming something that had been mine all along, my authority, my voice. Later that week, Caroline and I sat on the back porch while my daughter napped. We shared a bottle of wine, my first, in what felt like ages, and watched the wind rustle the trees. You know, she said, for someone who's gone through hell and back, you're holding it together better than most people I know. I don't know if I'm holding it together, I replied. I think I'm just too tired to fall apart. She laughed. That still counts. We talked about everything and nothing. For the next hour, childhood memories, old music, even the awful dates we'd both endured before settling down. At one point, she leaned in and asked, "Do you think you'll ever try again?" Try what? Love, trust, dating. The thought made me pause. I hadn't thought that far ahead. My world had been reduced to diapers, court documents, and emotional triage. Love wasn't on the radar, but her question lingered in the air. Maybe someday, I said slowly. But right now, I need to learn how to trust myself again. That's the relationship I need to fix first. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant, and I think she did. That night, I sat in the nursery again, this time with a notebook in my lap and my daughter asleep in my arms. I started jotting down things I wanted her to know, not now, but years from now. Maybe when she was 16 and heartbroken for the first time. Maybe when she had her own daughter. I wrote, "You deserve the kind of love that shows up, that listens, that stays. You deserve honesty, even when it's hard. You deserve to never beg for someone's loyalty. And if someone ever makes you feel like you're too much, go find someone who thinks you're just right." I kept writing until the page was full. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about shaping the life I wanted for both of us. A life with intention, with clarity, with real, grounded love, even if it came only from me for now. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. Just me and my daughter in the kitchen, music playing softly in the background. She watched me from her high chair, waving her spoon like a tiny queen. I handed her a piece of pancake, and she squealed with joy. And in that moment, I realized something important. We were going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday we would look back at this chapter and see it for what it was, a turning point. The moment when everything I thought I needed fell apart, just so I could build something stronger in its place. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that would be enough. Fall crept in quietly. The trees along the sidewalk began to turn the colors of fire, burnt orange, crimson red, and golden yellow. The mornings were cooler, and I started bundling up my daughter in her little knit hat and fleece jacket before our walks. With Mark gone, the days moved slower, but there was a strange calm to it now, the kind of quiet you notice after the ringing in your ears fades. I was rebuilding, not just my schedule, not just my household, my sense of self. I started therapy, something I had always promised I'd do one day. Turns out, one day came right after heartbreak. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s named Marlene, had a way of making me feel seen without having to explain everything. She didn't say much in our first few sessions, just enough to let me fall apart in a room where I didn't have to be strong for anyone. "You're grieving more than a relationship," she said once. "You're grieving the version of life you thought you were going to have." That stuck with me, because it was true. I hadn't just lost a man. I'd lost the picture I had painted in my head, the holiday mornings as a family, the messy dinners, the bedtime stories with both parents in the room. It was all gone. And now I had to redraw my life using different colors. One Thursday morning, as I was dropping my daughter off at daycare, the director pulled me aside. "She's doing wonderfully," she said, "adjusting better than expected." I smiled, relieved. "She's resilient, probably more than I give her credit for. She seems very grounded, happy. That's you, you know. That's what you're giving her." The words nearly brought tears to my eyes. I'd spent so much time questioning myself, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was enough. But here was a professional telling me I was doing something right. And that mattered. Later that week, I had coffee with Caroline again. We met at our favorite diner, the one with the squeaky red booths and waitresses who remembered your order by heart. "I've been thinking," she said between sips. "You ever consider writing all this down? Your story, I mean." I blinked. "You mean like a journal?" "No, like a blog or an essay, something public. You're not the only woman who's gone through this. But not everyone gets the ending you're working toward." I wasn't sure anyone would care about my story. I wasn't famous or flashy, just a woman in her mid-30s, trying to hold it all together after a messy breakup and a baby. But still, the idea sat in my head long after our coffee cups were empty. That night, after my daughter went to sleep, I opened my laptop and began to type. I didn't write for anyone else, not at first. I just wrote for me. The truth, the pain, the betrayal, the quiet moments of peace that followed, the therapy sessions, the strength I never knew I had, and the fierce love I was growing every day for my daughter and for myself. I didn't hold back. I didn't sugarcoat. I just let the words pour out, and it felt good. I hit publish on a private blog, no fanfare, no promotion, just me and the blinking cursor on a screen. The next day, I woke up to 3 comments. Strangers. Women who said, "This is my story too." That was the moment I realized something bigger than my own healing was happening. There were so many of us. Women who had been lied to, left, told to settle, told to stay, and who had risen anyway. I didn't feel so alone anymore. That weekend, I took my daughter on a day trip to the pumpkin patch. Just the 2 of us. We rode the hay wagon, took silly photos with scarecrows, and picked the roundest little pumpkin in the whole field. As we sat on a bench eating warm apple cider donuts, I looked at her, really looked at her. Her cheeks were sticky with sugar, her hair slightly tangled, and her laugh echoing through the crisp fall air. She was happy. And not just in a passing moment kind of way, she was thriving, and so was I. That evening, when we returned home, I found a letter in the mailbox. From Mark. It was handwritten, in shaky penmanship. No return address, just my name. I stood in the kitchen with the envelope in my hand for a long time. Part of me didn't want to open it. What could he possibly say now that would matter? But eventually, I did. The letter was long, rambling in places, apologetic in others. He talked about regret, about how he hadn't realized what he had until it was gone, how he had taken me and fatherhood for granted. He said he was seeing a counselor now, that he was working at a local hardware store, that he missed us. But the last paragraph stuck with me most. "I know I'm not entitled to your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. The damage, the mistake. And I hope one day you'll be able to see me as something more than the man who broke your heart. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer, not to reread, not to respond to, just to remind myself how far I had come. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just breathed, in and out, steady and strong. Because his words didn't hold power anymore. Not over me, not over my future. And that night, after I tucked my daughter into bed, I logged onto my blog and wrote something new. I may not have the perfect love story, but I have the truest one. The kind where I chose myself, where I walked away from betrayal, not broken, but stronger. And if you're reading this and wondering if you'll survive it too, let me be the first to say, you already are. I hit publish. Then I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and let the quiet wrap around me again. But this time, the quiet didn't feel like loss. It felt like peace. It had been nearly a month since I posted that last blog entry. I hadn't shared it with anyone outside the handful of people who stumbled across it, but somehow, word had spread. Strangers began messaging me, older women, younger women, even men thanking me for putting their pain into words. One message came from a woman in her 70s who wrote, "I wish I had left when I was your age. You're giving people like me a little healing, even now." That one stayed with me. I never set out to inspire anyone. I had just needed a place to put my pain, to make sense of the betrayal, and to map out a new path. But now, knowing it helped others, it gave the struggle a purpose I didn't know I needed. By mid-October, life had settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, but dependable. Mornings were filled with little shoes and cereal crumbs. Afternoons with work emails and daycare pickups. Evenings with books and lullabies. I had found comfort in the simple things. A warm mug of tea, the smell of lavender baby lotion, the silence after a long day. But then, an unexpected invitation arrived. Caroline texted me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, weird question. You remember Vanessa?" My heart stuttered a little. "The Vanessa? The one from the dinner?" "Yeah." She reached out. "Wants to talk." I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend it never came. The other part, the stronger, braver part, wanted answers. Closure. What does she want? She didn't say. Just that she wanted to talk to you, said she owes you an apology. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where the last of the leaves had begun to fall. I thought of that night, the dinner, the confrontation, the way Vanessa's face had gone pale when she realized she was part of something much bigger than she understood. Maybe she did owe me an apology. Maybe she didn't, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. Tell her to meet me at the corner cafe. Thursday, noon. Thursday came quickly. I dressed simply jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. I didn't want to impress anyone. I just wanted to feel like myself. Vanessa was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a coffee she hadn't touched. She stood when she saw me, then sat quickly again, as if unsure whether she had the right to rise. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. "Let's not pretend we're friends. Just say what you need to say." She winced, but she didn't argue. "I didn't know," she began. "Not at first. When I met him, he said he was single, that he was dealing with custody stuff and living apart from the mother of his child. He made it sound like, you were just someone he co-parented with. Nothing romantic." I folded my arms. "And when did you find out the truth?" She looked ashamed. "Not until a week before the dinner. Someone tagged him in a photo holding you at the baby shower. I asked him about it, and he got weird. Said it was complicated, that you two were still living together for the baby's sake. But I knew he was lying. I kept my expression neutral. So why show up at dinner?" She sighed. "Because he begged me to. Said he'd explain everything to everyone that night, that he just needed me there for support. I think I was still hoping he'd choose me, that I wasn't just another one of the girls. I was stupid. There it was, the honesty, the kind of truth that didn't make her innocent, but at least made her human. I never wanted to hurt you, she said. You looked so strong that night, but I saw the hurt too, and I knew I had helped cause it. For the first time, I let the ice crack. You were one of many, I said softly. So don't carry more guilt than you deserve. But don't excuse yourself either. She nodded, eyes glossy. I wanted to tell you something else, she added. He's seeing someone new, another girl. I met her through a mutual friend. Same story says he's starting over, recovering from a toxic ex, trying to be a better man. I almost laughed. He always did know how to flip the script, I said. Vanessa looked at me. I just thought you should know, so you're not blindsided again. I thanked her, finished my coffee, and left. I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt done. That evening, I lit a candle after putting my daughter to bed. A simple vanilla one I kept on the kitchen counter. I poured a glass of red wine and took my laptop to the porch. I began to write again. Some people never change, but you do. You grow, you heal, you get smarter, softer, stronger. And one day, the people who hurt you can't even touch the edges of your peace. I didn't write it for him, or Vanessa, or anyone else who had played a part in my pain. I wrote it for the woman I was becoming, the woman who had survived the worst and still chose to open her heart. That weekend, I took my daughter to the local fall festival. She wore a little fox costume and chased leaves around the town square. I ran into people I hadn't seen in years, parents from high school, old co-workers, the occasional curious neighbor. One of them, an older woman from our church, stopped me as we waited for a pumpkin painting booth. You look well, she said warmly. You always had such a light about you. I'm glad to see it shining again. I smiled. And this time, it was real, because I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. And that light? It wasn't from anyone else. It had always been mine. Winter arrived sooner than expected that year. The wind cut sharper, and the sun seemed to set earlier each day. But I didn't mind. There was something comforting about the stillness, about wrapping myself and my daughter in layers of warmth, and letting the rest of the world keep spinning without me for a while. December brought with it the anniversary of everything: the pregnancy announcement, the betrayal, the fallout. 1 year. It was strange how much had changed, and even stranger how much hadn't. I still lived in the same little house, still drank my morning coffee in the same chipped mug, still sang lullabies to the same baby girl each night. But I was different. A year ago, I was preparing for a future built on lies. Now, I was living in truth. I had gone back to the blog after some time away, posting reflections here and there. To my surprise, the readership had grown. Messages trickled in daily, some short, others heartbreakingly long. Women from across the country shared their own stories, of husbands who had vanished, of partners who had drained their savings, of second chances that never came. And always, they ended with some version of the same sentiment. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. That was the thing I had learned most through all of this. None of us were ever truly alone. Not in heartbreak, not in healing. I was folding laundry one evening when I got a text from Mark's mother. Can I come by? Just for a few minutes? It had been months since I heard from her. After the dinner, she'd reached out once or twice, offering apologies and awkward attempts at support. But our conversations had never gone deep. I wasn't angry with her. I just didn't have the energy to rebuild something that had been so thoroughly burned. Still, I owed her a reply, tomorrow afternoon, while the baby naps. She arrived right on time, holding a small paper bag and wearing a heavy wool coat that made her look smaller than I remembered. She looked tired, older, maybe. Grief ages all of us in quiet ways. Hi, she said, stepping inside. Hi. We sat in the living room. I offered tea, which she accepted, and for a few minutes, we sipped in silence. I wanted to give you this, she finally said, handing me the bag. Inside was a soft pink baby blanket, hand-knitted with tiny hearts woven into the pattern. I made it before the baby was born, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't think I had the right to give it to you, not after everything. I ran my fingers over the yarn, touched by the effort. It's beautiful. Thank you. She nodded, her eyes watery. I've been reading your blog. That caught me off guard. I hadn't imagined she would. I never knew the whole story, she continued. Mark never told me everything. Not really. He just said you were angry and made a scene. But reading your words, I saw it. What he did, how much you carried. I didn't speak. I let her say what she needed to. I'm sorry, she said finally, for the things I said that night, for raising a son who didn't deserve you. She looked up, her hands trembling. You were the best thing that ever happened to him. And he threw it away. It wasn't vindication, it wasn't revenge, but it was real, and that made it meaningful. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I don't hate Mark, but I can't trust him either, and I won't let him hurt our daughter. I understand, she said, and I won't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you for walking away, for standing up for yourself. I don't know if I would have had that kind of strength. I smiled gently. You would have. You just needed someone to remind you it was there. She left not long after, and I placed the blanket in my daughter's drawer, folding it carefully beside the others. It might never be used, but it represented something more important: acknowledgement, growth, the quiet apology of a woman who had seen the truth a little too late. As the new year approached, I began making plans, not resolutions, exactly, but intentions. I applied for a promotion at work. I enrolled my daughter in a little music class that met on Saturday mornings. I bought myself a new coat, not because I needed one, but because I wanted to feel different when I stepped outside. And on January honest, I wrote one final blog post. 1 year ago, I thought my world had ended. In some ways, it did. But from the rubble, I built something stronger. I've learned that heartbreak doesn't have to break you forever. That betrayal doesn't define your worth. That leaving isn't weakness. It's courage in its purest form. And now, when I look at my daughter, I don't just see a reminder of the pain. I see the reason I kept going. The reason I became who I am. She's not the end of my story. She's the beginning. I hit publish and closed the laptop. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she reached up, her tiny hand brushing my cheek. Mama, she whispered. My heart caught in my throat. Yes, baby? She smiled, eyes already drifting closed. I love you. Tears slipped down my face, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of it all. The full circle. I love you too, I whispered back. More than anything. As I sat beside her crib, I realized something I had once thought impossible. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And everything that had once broken me had, in the end, built the foundation for the life I had always deserved. One with peace, one with joy, one with love, not from someone else, but from within. And that, I decided, would always be enough. Reflection: as we grow older, many of us carry the belief that we've seen it all, that our years of experience will shield us from the deep heartbreaks of youth. But life has a way of surprising us even in our strongest seasons. This story reminds us that betrayal can come at any stage, and love doesn't always mean loyalty. Yet, through all the pain, one truth stands tall. We are never too old to start over, never too late to rediscover our worth. The most powerful message here isn't about revenge or justice. It's about resilience. About knowing when to stop begging someone to be who they promised they were. About choosing peace over chaos, even when it means walking away from the life you thought you were building. For many in their golden years, this story may stir old wounds or forgotten sacrifices, but let it also serve as a quiet, steady reminder. Strength doesn't come from staying, it comes from standing up, from letting go, from knowing that your dignity and your peace are more valuable than any hollow apology. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that healing is always possible, and love, the real kind, begins with how we treat ourselves.